Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I really wanted to put out an opinion piece. I posted something on my Facebook page, and it has to do with an ongoing issue that's been quite prominent in ISKCON for some time. And before I start, I would just like to make the point that this is my opinion only. I don't represent anybody else. I share an opinion with people on certain issues, and but I don't represent any organization. So the issue, of course, you may have already recognized, might be the issue that is before us for some time, that are Vaishnavis considered eligible to give Diksha in ISKCON. This has been an ongoing issue. It's been an ongoing issue for close to 20 years. And it was an issue even before it first came before the GBC. In 2003, the GBC they approached the SAC, or the Shastra Advisory Committee, to research the idea whether women are allowed to give initiation as Diksha gurus. And they did that, and they came up with a position paper, which is available on the internet. It's not a secret, it's hidden off somewhere. And they researched various reasons why they should not, and various reasons why they should. And they came to the conclusion, almost unanimously in the Shastra Advisory Committee, that there was no reason why Vaishnavis, or devotees who are of the feminine gender, why they could not or should not be allowed to give initiation in ISKCON. So that stretched into 2009. GBC voted to allow, and then they voted again in 2019. So altogether, the GBC has voted on this issue 3 times. They may not have been as unanimous on the issue as the Shastra Advisory Committee was, but they were fairly unanimous that the issue passed, and that the Vaishnavis should be allowed to give initiation in ISKCON. Of course, this was not implemented. And the reason it was not implemented was that there was a lot of contrary opinion, coming mostly from devotees who were in management on the Indian side of ISKCON, in India primarily, though not exclusively in India. Devotees in other countries, and some people who are not Indian by birth at all, but are Western background, also shared the same opinion that this was not to be done. It has never been done in Shastra, and that this was some kind of illegitimate idea that had sprung up from people in the West who were too much influenced by Western culture, particularly feminism and Western equality, etc., etc. So this was their view. And so even after it had been agreed upon, and even one Vaishnavi was about to give Diksha, then the whole idea was put on hold. And this was, led up to some discussion from 2019 to 2022. And then in 2022, there was a formal 3-year hold put on the issue that had already been voted on 3 times in the positive, that it was within our culture, within our Shastric understanding, within Prabhupada's explanations, for ladies to be in the office of officiating gurus or Diksha gurus. Maybe to some who are outside of ISKCON, some of these things seem might be very strange or unusual, but we base our activities and what we do on the Vedic literatures, particularly the way that Srila Prabhupada presented them. And so we have the Vedic literatures, all the Sanskrit is there, but just to know Sanskrit, one may even be quite scholarly in understanding Sanskrit. Prabhupada went to the extra effort of putting purports to everything he said. In other words, he explained things to us that we might have otherwise missed, or tried to put things in context. So Prabhupada, in one of his purports, explains that knowledge is to understand what is spirit and what is matter, and intelligence is to be able to understand how to place things in proper perspective. Now, to go further, when the issue was put on hold in 2022, there was an idea that there would be some talks with the leaders who, especially in India, were opposed to the notion of Vaishnavis getting initiation, and talks with people who had the opinion of the GBC. And so those began. And during this time, of course, even up until this time, there was a lot of debate on the issue, and the movement was divided to some extent. The GBC was not so divided. The Shastric Advisory Committee, or SAC, were pretty much unanimous on the idea. They represented the devotees who, at that time, had been considered the leading devotees in research in Vedic literature and understanding and putting the Vaishnava tradition in proper perspective. So, as these talks went on and debates went on, gradually it came to be a deadlock. Those who were against were absolutely against. And later, what grew out of it was a second type of Shastric Advisory Committee called the IISB, I believe it's Indian ISKCON Shastric Bureau or Board or something like that. I'm sorry if I misrepresented the nomenclature. I probably misrepresented SAC's nomenclature as well. But at any rate, they came to the opposite conclusion of SAC. And then, although talks were scheduled, the talks broke down. Then there was the idea of doing mediation. For a long time, the devotees met and they discussed with leaders of both views. And these leaders, they expressed their opinion, and some devotees that we have, they're very skilled at mediation and trying to resolve issues that are very difficult. They were involved in this overall push to try to reconcile the parties so that we could go together as one ISKCON. And after a while, the talks, the mediation, they all came to nothing. It was proposed by the mediation team that such basic positions as whether or not to allow Vaishnavis to initiate, whether that should happen or should not happen, should be left up to local and regional managers. That if in their countries, in their location, they felt it was not socially appropriate, they could withhold the ability of ladies to give initiation. Similarly, where that was not considered to be the wrong view, it would be allowed. But that was unacceptable. Those on the side of wanting to just push the stalemate aside and leave it up to local managers were willing to cede that if there were cultural ideas that seemed to proscript ladies from giving initiation in some cultures in some countries, then let it be so. But there was no ability even to compromise. So compromise failed, heart-to-heart talks failed, talks of getting to know the leaders of ISKCON in India, all kinds of attempts basically just came to a complete halt. There was no interest in further continuing these talks. So that was some 3 years ago. And there was a proposal that during this time some type of rapprochement, some kind of unification would come about, and everyone would get together and something would be decided. But as of yet, that hasn't happened. So this whole thing really bubbled out in really the 2000s, early 2000s. And then there was these decisions by the ultimate managing board of our whole movement, the GBC, also known as the Governing Body Commission. They voted in favor. So still it's on hold. It's been on hold all this time. And there is no reason for it to continue on hold indefinitely. During the time when this talks were going on, during that time, the management body of India created their own version of a Shastric council, one that specifically was keen on putting forward the view that it's not within our Shastric mandate to allow Vaishnavis to initiate. They, at the same time, also created a kind of separate organization. They wanted to create an entire separate organization for even child protection, which had been considered to be, of course, locally managed, but that there would be a one ISKCON over structure. So they decided to create a parallel structure. So doing all this time, the management in India has pretty much created a parallel organization. And this whole issue still remains unresolved to this day. The pressure is that if the GBC implements the proposal that they voted on 3 times already to go ahead with allowing Vaishnavis to give initiation, that they will feel that is a broach of our philosophy, and therefore they will en masse distance themselves from ISKCON. Now, our founder made a pretty strong statement that he wanted ISKCON to remain as one piece, not break into fragments or little pockets of different management. He wanted one organization. That one organization is supposed to be managed by the GBC, also known as the UMA, or the Ultimate Managing Authority. So this is the way things have been for some time. And we are wondering, when will this accepted proposal, it's not a proposal, it's a resolution already, to allow Vaishnavis to initiate, when will that actually be implemented? That's the question. Now, this question can remain unanswered. We can remain postponing it. But at some point, ISKCON will be actually divided. We're already divided, obviously, on this issue. and some say divided enough to basically walk away, which is what our founder actually did not want us to do. So, Srila Prabhupada, to give a kind of framing of the issue, we can ask simple questions. We can ask the idea if Prabhupada actually did want his female disciples to initiate. And when the Shastric Advisory Committee came up, they researched the issues, and they gave some strong reasons why, according to our Vedic literatures, this might not be done or should not be done. But they also understood that there are reasons why it appears that our spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, did actually want this implemented. So what were some of these? Just to put a broad frame on it, first I'd like to start off with the fact that it's quite clear that the Vedic literatures have a long tradition. And it's quite clear the Vedas are quite, they have a lot of things to say about a lot of things. And in some cases, it appears the Vedas apparently contradict one another. But our contention is that there is a Siddhanta, a theme, that ties all the Vedic literatures together. And though sometimes in some places, certain Vedic literatures do talk to people at different levels, in some cases, they make more minor things appear very prominent for the reason that certain people hold some internal commitments to certain ideas or certain foundational principles. And so therefore they're encouraged when they're encouraged in those principles, and therefore they make advancement. However, those might not be the ultimate deciding principles. And we're based on Shastra or Scripture, which of course is mostly in Sanskrit, but in some cases, in some places, we have a lot of our important literature in the Bengali language. And it takes a certain kind of both literary and translational expertise to understand what's being said. But beyond that, there's something called hermeneutics, which means that even if one understands a language, even if one is gifted at being able to translate from one language to another, still one may miss the point, because there are so many levels. And therefore, that's why in Prabhupada's books we see that there weren't just the Sanskrit verses translated into English, but rather each verse was not only translated, but there's this thing called a purport. And the purport is what puts these various dictums or these various verses into a perspective, both for newcomers and for those who have been involved in spiritual life for some time. And therefore the spiritual master is not at liberty to say anything and everything, because what he says has to come from the Vedic literature. But at the same time, it is possible to take Vedic literature and come up with all kinds of senses of what is more important and what is less important, as well as missing the point of the literature altogether. That is easy to happen as well. So we take very seriously, particularly our own spiritual master and his explanations of the Vedic literature. That's the most important part. Now, what I'm going to read here are a couple of the quotes that come directly from Prabhupada. So there was a meeting that Prabhupada had in 1976 in Toronto with a professor named O'Connell. And when he was having this meeting, O'Connell was there with several devotees, and there was a woman in the crowd, and she asked this question: Swamiji, would you say something about the place of women in our movement? And so here's how Prabhupada replied. Prabhupada, there is no distinction between man and woman. That is clearly said in Bhagavad Gita. Mam hi partha vipashutya yepishu papayoneha sudro vaishyastata striyo vaishyastata sudras. So these classes are understood to be less intelligent. Women, Sudras, and Vaishyas. But Krishna says no. Even for them it is open. Because in the spiritual platform there's no such distinction. Man, woman, black, white, big, small. No. Everyone is spirit soul. Pandita Samadarshana, Bhagavad Gita 5:18. Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gabi Hastini Sinu Chaiva Supake Cha Pandita. Again, that's more of the verse from Bhagavad Gita 5:18. One who is actually learned, he is Samadarshana. He does not make any distinctions, but so far as our material body is concerned, there must be some distinctions for keeping society in order. Woman. The woman then could become panditas. Prabhupada, oh yes. Te piyante param gatim. Not only come, she can also attain perfection. There is no such restriction, Krishna said. Woman, do you have any panditas in the Western movement? And Prabhupada replies, there are so many Western women, girls in our society. They are chanting, dancing, taking to Krishna consciousness. Of course, because superficially, bodily, there is some distinction, we keep the women separate from the men. That's all. Otherwise, the rites are the same. So here, we have a prelude. This is all one conversation, and this happened in 1973. It's the prelude. Now, Professor O'Connell, who had been listening, he asked the question, is it possible, Swamiji, for a woman to be a guru in the line of the cyclic succession? And here's how Prabhupada replies. Prabhupada, yes, Janava Devi was Nityananda's wife. She became. If she is able to get the highest perfection of life, then why is it not possible to become guru? But not so many. Actually, one who has attained the perfection, she can become guru. But man or woman, unless one has attained perfection, Ye Krishna Tattvaveti Se Guru Hoya. That's from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhyam 8, 128. The qualification of guru is that he must be fully cognizant of the science of Krishna. Then he or she can become guru. Ye Krishna Tattvaveti Se Guru Hoya. In our material world, is there any prohibition that a woman cannot become professor? If she is qualified, she can become professor. What is the wrong there? She must be qualified. That is the position. So similarly, if the woman understands Krishna consciousness perfectly, she can become guru. So there's a little bit more to it. But that's a very strong statement. Now, those who oppose to the idea of women becoming gurus, they say that this statement is not correct because it violates our scriptures. They say the statement is not important because Prabhupada did not put it in his books. They say this statement is not relevant, but they don't explain exactly how Prabhupada could, at the same time, make a statement like this. This is not ambiguous at all. The entire thread of these two conversations between the woman and also Professor O'Connell is pretty straightforward. Nothing murky or difficult to understand about it. It's pretty straightforward. Now we could say that is this just a one-off thing that Prabhupada said, and he never said anything like this before or ever again? And the answer again is no. We have several other points where Prabhupada made some very, very similar statements. For instance, we have this one. I want that all of my spiritual sons and daughters will inherit the title of Bhaktivedanta, so that the family transcendental diploma will continue down through the generations. Those possessing the title of Bhaktivedanta will be allowed to initiate disciples. Maybe by 1975, all my disciples will be allowed to initiate and increase the number of generations. That is my program. This was, however, in a letter to Hansaduta on the December 3rd, 1968. So here's another. So I hope that all of you, men, women, boys, and girls, become spiritual master and follow this principle. Spiritual master, simply, sincerely follow the principles and speak to the general public. When Krishna becomes your favorite, then Krishna becomes your favorite. Krishna does not become your favorite. You become Krishna's favorite. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Na cham tasmad manusyeshu kaschin me priya pritamaha. One who is doing this humble service of preaching work, Krishna consciousness, no one is dearer to him than dearer than him to me. So if you want to become recognized by Krishna very quickly, you take up this process of becoming spiritual master. Present the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Your life is perfect. Thank you very much. What makes these statements strong is they support the very same conclusion that the first one did. Of course, chronologically, these happened in a different order, but nonetheless, we have this idea that Prabhupada is encouraging. Nobody was coming before him with some question in their mind. No one was coming before him saying, women need equal rights or anything like that. Prabhupada said these things on his own. And Prabhupada was not a person who was known for mincing words if he opposed something philosophically. He never kowtowed to people's opinions just because they were important or he didn't want to hurt their feelings. That was not Prabhupada's style. So we have these statements, and there are more. I could go on, but I don't want to increase this too much. Now, there is a contrasting statement, and that's the one that those who are opposed to the idea of ladies being initiating guru, there's a statement from them that they constantly quote, and that one is in Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm sorry, not Chaitanya Charitamrita, but in Srimad Bhagavatam. And that verse is Canto 4, 12, I think 32, if I remember right. Yeah, 4, 12, 32. And I'll read what that says. Of course, the verse itself doesn't speak about the idea of ISKCON. It doesn't speak about the idea of initiation other than he makes one comment. So here is the English translation. Dhruva was seated in a transcendental airplane, which was just about to start. When he remembered his poor mother, Suniti, he thought to himself, how shall I go alone to the Vaikuntha planet and leave my poor mother behind? So that's the actual verse, and Prabhupada's commenting on it. So this is where we get the contrary evidence, or not the only place, but one of the places. Dhruva had a feeling of obligation to his mother, Suniti. It was Suniti who had given him the clue which had now enabled him to be personally carried to the Vaikuntha planet by the associates of Lord Vishnu. He now remembered her and wanted to take her with him. Actually, Dhruva Maharaj's mother, Suniti, was the Pata Pradarshika Guru. Pata Pradarshika Guru means the Guru or spiritual master who shows the way. In other words, when the first initiates one, or first gives one the knowledge of spiritual life. Such a Guru is sometimes called Shiksha Guru. Although Narada Muni was his Diksha Guru, initiating spiritual master, Suniti, his mother, was the first who gave him instruction on how to achieve the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the duty of the Shiksha Guru or Diksha Guru to instruct the disciple in the right way, and it depends on the disciple to execute the process. According to Sastric conjunctions, there is no difference between Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru, and generally the Shiksha Guru later on becomes the Diksha Guru. Suniti, however, being a woman, and specifically his mother, could not become Dhruva Maharaj's Diksha Guru. Still, he was not less obliged to Suniti. There's no question of carrying Narada Muni to Vaikuntha, but Dhruva Maharaj thought of his mother. So there's another paragraph, and I'll read it just for completeness, so I won't be accused of clip quoting. Whatever plan the Supreme Personality of Godhead contemplates immediately fructifies. Similarly, a devotee who is completely dependent on the Supreme Lord can also fulfill his wishes by the grace of the Lord. The Lord fulfills his wishes independently, but the devotee fulfills his wishes simply by being dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, as soon as Dhruva thought of his poor mother, he was assured by the associates of Vishnu that Suniti was going to Vaikuntha Loka in another plane. Dhruva Maharaj had thought that he was going alone to Vaikuntha Loka, leaving behind his mother, which was not very auspicious, because people would criticize him for going alone to Vaikuntha Loka and not carrying with him Suniti, who had given so much to him. But Dhruva also considered that he was not personally the Supreme. Therefore, Krishna fulfilled his desires. Only then would it be possible. Krishna could immediately understand his mind, and he told Dhruva that his mother was also going with him. This incident proves that a pure devotee like Dhruva Maharaj can fulfill all his desires by the grace of the Lord and become exactly like the Lord, and thus, whenever he thinks of anything, his wish is immediately fulfilled. So, the key phrase here, of course, is that end of the first paragraph, where Suniti, however, being a woman, and specifically his mother, could not become Dhruva Maharaj's Diksha Guru. Still, he was not less obliged to Suniti. The Vedic literatures, they say many things, and everything has to be understood in a context, in what is more important and what's less important. And it's quite clear that in the past women were mostly not gurus, although even in the past there have been examples of Vaishnavis who did in fact accept disciples. Some of them were consorts of one of Krishna's varied expansions, so we can assume that they're not normal women, because they're actually coming directly from the spiritual world. But others were not in that category, yet it happened. Though, as Prabhupada mentions in one of the quotes that I read, the quote that favors the allowing of Diksha for women, that it's not so many. So, for whatever reason, whether they so many don't desire it, or so many don't try to live up to the qualifications. Still, there's no doubt that in the past, generally speaking, there was a particular type of instruction for women. And sometimes people are offended by hearing the negative things that Prabhupada says about women, but Prabhupada is only quoting the Vedas. The Vedas say those things. So one can actually be angry at the Vedas or decide to pass them up, because how could a literature that's spiritual say such things? But the response to that is that the Vedas say so many things about all kinds of different demographic groups. It isn't just women. There are parts of the Vedas which talk about the bad characteristics and habits of sannyasis, like I am, of gurus, of people who are householders, of people who are kings, of people who are in all kinds of responsible positions. So the Vedic literatures aren't saying these things to convince people that they shouldn't bother trying to elevate themselves. They say these things because these are the particular hurdles that a particular demographic is likely to encounter. So, in this particular section here, in Srimad Bhagavatam 4.12.33, or 32 rather, this particular bit that we're looking at here, Prabhupada is discussing Dhruva, who lived in Satya Yuga, and that was a long time ago. What to speak of a long time ago, even 3,000 years ago is a long time ago. But the Vedas are divided into things that are more important and things that are less important. And out of those things, we have certain principles that can never change. And that's why we call it the absolute truth. Some things are the same for all people, all times, and all places. But not all of the Vedas are like that. The Vedas also have prescriptions for people that things which are based on their time, on the place, on the particular demographic we're discussing. And so those are what we call relative truth. Prabhupada described that word many times, relative truth. Absolute truth is always the same. Relative truth is based on absolute truth. So absolute truth never changes, and we can never change that. And such things as changing the absolute truth mean you've lost the absolute truth. You're no longer talking about the real goal of the Vedas or the real purpose of the Vedas. However, to adapt things to time, place, and circumstance is something that one must do, and the Acharyas did it as well. What to speak of our own Prabhupada? We had Bhaktisiddhanta, and we had others before him. So in each succession, the Acharyas, they mold things so that they keep the absolute truth in place, but they may adjust the relative truth. That's the important issue. They adjust the relative truth so that it's assimilatable by people in the general area, with a general mentality, with a general cultural background. We can't ignore that these things exist. That's why there was the issue of allowing local management to discuss and decide among themselves whether it should be allowed in their particular area or not, whether Vaishnavis could give Diksha in their area or they would not be allowed to. This is what I'm proposing is a relative truth. And these cultural trappings are outgrowths of basic policies. Those policies are based on the absolute truth. Absolute truth never changes, but policies are made to best serve the purpose of the absolute truth, bringing as many people to a higher level of spiritual life as possible. And since culture changes, time changes, people change, the degradation of Kali Yuga is certainly upon us. So therefore things are adjusted. This is how the same man could say that I want all my sons and daughters to become spiritual masters, and how he could say there is no prohibition, and how he could say that a person who wants to be a professor, if they're a woman, is there anything wrong there? And also say this statement that a woman could not become Dhruva Maharaj's guru. He's speaking during this time and in this setting. Otherwise, we have to find some reason how he could say both things. And so this argument has gone on quite some time. And There are those who feel absolutely this is a main point of our philosophy that women cannot initiate, but we don't find it in any of our verses. In fact, we find the opposite, that Kibra Vipra, Kibra Nasi Sudra Kena Nai, Ye Krishna Tattvaveti, Ye Se Guru Hai. That if one is a Shudra or a sannyasi or whatever one is, if one understands the science of Krishna, one can be a guru, which echoes quite nicely with what Prabhupada said in the affirmative on the issue of Vaisnavi Diksa. Indian culture is no doubt caught in a particular way of socializing and a social fabric. And there's no doubt that the Vedas are what that social fabric grew out of. And when we look at our present Kali Yuga, we find that people are all disqualified. There's a verse called that translates as Kalo Shudra Sambhava, that in Kali Yuga everyone is a Shudra. So there are no higher births in Kali Yuga, at least by birth. At the same time, we hear the idea that one can rise above Sarvopadi Vinirmuktam, Tatparapayana Nirmalam, and that Rishikena Rishikesha Sevam Bhakti Uchita. That all one's upadis, or whatever ill qualities are invested in a person because of their birth, they can be overcome simply by accepting Krishna. So we know that we are not the body. That's a basic teaching of Bhagavad Gita. The whole second chapter from verse 20 to verse 30 basically makes that point over and over again. Krishna is saying these words. We are souls in a body. So right now we might have a male body, we might have a female body. In the next verse it might be the opposite. We might trade roles. In fact, in Srimad Bhagavatam it suggests just such a thing. That generally speaking, men become women in their next lives, women become men in their next lives. So the soul is not, doesn't have the gender that the body recommends or the body seems to resonate with. Now, to say that a woman cannot rise above her tendencies as a woman, the ill qualifications that are characteristics usually attributed to the women class, is to say that maybe men can't either. It's not that men have no bad qualities. So everyone has some kind of bad qualities. Each demographic has their own particular brew of bad qualities. And so we have to rise above them. And that's what the Vedas recommend. Simply by engaging in spiritual life sincerely and practically, one can overcome. Now, it's not easy to overcome 100% of the time, but one can make some progress. So it's understood that the activity or office of being a guru or diksha guru is a very high office, and certainly there should be some qualifications, but there's no mention that the qualifications of men and the qualifications of women should be different. Prabhupada explained that in that little segment I read from Prabhupada talking to the lady that was there in the meeting with Professor O'Connell. So there's not likely to be any further conversation, any further dialogue on this issue. Mostly both sides have become thoroughly entrenched, and it's not likely that any kind of mediation will take place. In fact, compromise has been tried, and no compromise was acceptable. Those opposed the Vaisnavi Diksha or Vaisnavi initiation refused to budge 1 inch from the platform, that nowhere, anywhere in the movement at any time should any lady be allowed to initiate anything. So this is not going to change anytime soon. There's nothing on the horizon. I thought maybe there was some magic thing that was happening, that people knew something special. I've kind of given up on waiting for that. I don't think it's imminent, and I'm certainly not holding my breath. So I'm just wondering, when will this issue finally be implemented? And if those who are managing India decide to opt out, let them opt out. And in the future we shall see whether the entire Western movement crashes into the ocean, which is not going to happen because they've accepted this. They have yet to prove that this is a major dictum. If it were, we would have no trouble finding many statements disallowing women from getting initiation. We would have many statements where Prabhupada would say, no, I don't want my Vaishnavis, I don't want my women disciples to initiate. Prabhupada didn't say that, did he? He said the opposite. He could have easily ended the whole issue right there. Now, that this statement, which is not really focused either on our movement, nor does it absolutely proclaim that no woman could be initiating anywhere, one has to assume that this statement in the Srimad Bhagavatam is somehow or another a Mahavakyam, or a statement that trumps and supersedes everything else. But that can't be shown. And how could Prabhupada say something that was so contradictory to Scripture as saying that all my boys and girls, all my men and women become gurus? How could he say that if he didn't believe it, if he didn't think it? It would be like Prabhupada saying Krishna is purple, or Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga is inferior to dhyan, or Krishna is actually more impersonal. That would be obviously a statement completely against many, many things that are said in many places in Scripture. But there's no such decree that we can find. The other interesting thing is that at the time when Prabhupada said these things, as I mentioned before, no one was pushing him on the question. It may not even come into our minds at that time. Everyone thought Prabhupada would live forever. Of course, he knew better. And in one sense, many of us knew that too. But we couldn't even conceive of the idea of somebody initiating after Prabhupada left the world, because at the time of Prabhupada, he was the only person initiating in ISKCON. So, at that time also, we know, if you understand culture and history, that it was common to speak about people in general with the male pronouns. When most people spoke, they would refer to, this wasn't just in ISKCON, this was a worldwide phenomenon up until about, 30, 50 years ago, or whenever it started to change, So, at that time, whenever someone spoke about humans in general, they usually used male pronouns. The fact that Prabhupada went out of his way to include his daughters, sons and daughters, these girls are not ordinary girls, but they are as good as their brothers. He said these things. These fly in the face of that whole notion that somehow or other that Vaisnavi Diksa is completely out of the question in Vedic Shastra and in Vedic understanding. It's obviously not. So, I want to end this by just explaining that we should be sure, and up until the time that all this started to turn into a turmoil, the GBC had accepted the idea that Vaishnavis should initiate. The scholars at that time had agreed upon it almost unanimously. Now we have a body of scholars who absolutely disagrees with it, a different group of people. And now we have a management that threatens to split ISKCON apart if anywhere these ladies are allowed to initiate. I say ISKCON is already divided, that we don't have to wait for something like that to happen. It's already happening. But if it continues in the ozone without a clear implementation of the 3 times already voted in the affirmative resolution, if it continues like that, then we'll likely see quiet quitting. And I would really not like to see the UMA become the UMA of only the UMA. We need to move forward on this. So if you've listened this far, you're probably an amazing person, because I'm sorry, I'm always prolix. I say too much. I take too much time to make what I say well known. But I wanted to kind of give an overview of it, at least an overview from my point of view. I cannot be relied upon to present the opposite point of view. As I said in my writings that I posted on my Facebook page, that I don't share that view, so I can't represent it properly. But I tried to give you at least some understanding of it. Please think about it, and we can pray together that actually, eventually, soon, not, already 20 years, why 20 years, that this issue comes to a final implementation. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.